Well, welcome to the show today, everybody. Thanks for tuning in and listening on the recording or listening live if you're here live. I am with Justin Reinmuth today. Justin, thanks for being here.
I appreciate it, Mike. It's good to see you.
Good to see you, man. We're going to talk cyber liability and liability insurance today. Everybody's favorite topic is insurance.
I can imagine.
But this is a really, 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 really important topic because and don't get scared away by thinking, oh my God, I don't want to listen about insurance. If you're listening to this, you stumbled upon this recording or you jumped on live. This is a really, really interesting and important topic for MSPs who are protecting their clients from what's going on. We're gonna dive into some crazy stuff. Me and Justin were talking about this last week, and if I had hair, it would have been standing on end. So let's see. So I want to start off by asking you, just explain who you are, what TechRug is. And I have to, now that we're on the call, because I've never asked you this, I've known you for a long time. Where'd that name come from, TechRug? I need to know what it means.
Yeah, it's a good question. So, I guess just a little bit of background, about myself. I had an IT partner with several, actually two other partners back down in Dallas, Texas in the late 90s, early part of 2000. And I know there's some stories out there. There was an MSP. It actually wasn't. We did a lot of, application development, project-based business. And back then in the late 90s, we also did IT staffing because that's kind of just what you did. It was Y2K. The computer systems were going to blow up. And, you had DB2 programmers that were used to making $30 an hour that were making 50. So anyways, everything went offshore development-wise. And so our two of our larger clients, which was 95% of our business, at a young age, I learned diversification real quick. Because when you go to sell your company, you get like pennies on the dollar type thing. But my two other partners just didn't want to develop that offshore model. So we ended up, basically getting rid of it. And I moved back to Columbus, Ohio, just because my wife and I wanted to be closer to family because we had no family down there, and got involved in insurance. And maybe like some of the people, MSPs on this call that are dealing with the local agent, I was that local agent that would write landscapers, bakeries, homes, autos. But I did a lot of professional liability for accountants, architects, engineers, IT companies. And I just felt, that I just related to those type of policies better than I did people's personal home and autos. It wasn't very exciting. So I happened to be sitting down with a client. I think it was, again, late 08. And they said, wow, you understand IT. Is this something you specialize in? So, started working with local IT service providers around the Columbus area, Ohio. And then again, fast forward today, we represent over 1,600 MSPs in 50 states on their insurance needs. So they could range anywhere from, something as simple as business insurance and workers' comp. Most people, honestly, they'll come to us for more complex needs like cyber liability, errors and omissions insurance, management liability, first and third party crime. So that's kind of what we do. In terms of TechRug, it stands for the Technology Risk Underwriting Group. So yeah, so when we first came out, it was like, okay, hi, I'm Justin Reinmuth with the Technology Risk Underwriting Group, or hi, I'm Justin with TechRug. And you get going, and it seemed like TechRug just rolled off your tongue a little bit better.
Right.
So we tried it both ways. We'd introduce ourselves that, and I think TechRug just kind of ended up sticking, and that's what we're using today. But again, it stands for the Technology Risk Underwriting Group. That
makes a lot of sense. I thought, I wonder what I get tech, but rug. I'm trying to think, like, is there, putting a rug under people? Or, it sounded cool. So insurance, I remember, and you actually were my agent for E&O insurance when I was a marketing agency back a couple of years ago. And things have gotten a lot more sophisticated with insurance needs over the past few years, right?
Yeah, no, I think that the one takeaway that MSPs have to understand is that you're dealing with an unregulated policy. So if you're going to talk about, quote unquote, regulated policies, I would say that would be your auto policy. It doesn't really matter whether you go with Progressive, Allstate, Geico. If you wreck your 3-year-old Ford, they're going to give you the value of the 3-year-old Ford. I can't tell you the number of times. I just reviewed one yesterday for not a client, but a prospect in Wisconsin that wanted to switch over. And he said, hey, how does yours compare to mine? And he had no first party coverages. And during the conversation, I had asked him, what are two of the things that scare you? Like what keeps you up at night? And one of the things he brought up was kind of what's going on, a ransomware attack against my MSP. I said, you have no cyber extortion. So in that policy, if he were to get hit today and the ransom is $150,000. He's self-insuring $150,000. He has no coverage. They also had put a failure to backup exclusion on his policy. When you read it, Mike, what the exclusion says is that, hey, if the backup doesn't work and your client sues you because of costs associated with recreating that data, don't come knock on our door. So they're unregulated policies, and different carriers are going to either include different insuring agreements, or they might even go one step further and include additional exclusions. So I think that's the biggest takeaway, is understanding that these are specialized policies. So you need to get with somebody that specializes, but it would be no different than any other industry. I mean, if you look at a doctor, if you've got a heart problem, you don't go to your ear, nose, and throat guy, right? Or if you've got a specialty type of an engineer, a structural engineer, you got to go to somebody that specializes in structural engineers, or else it's probably not going to turn out well. So that's probably what I would tell you with everything going on. I mean, MSPs being targeted, and unfortunately we haven't seen a stop to it quite yet, is realizing, this policy, if you want it to trigger, you've got to make sure that you've got the right policy for your organization, because if you don't, that's where you hear stories, well, insurance never works. Well, a lot of times when I review it, I'm like, well, yeah, it didn't work because you had an exclusion for that, or you took out the policy and it was the wrong policy. These policies are still, what I would say, are pretty affordable, and they're still very, very broad. So.
Yeah, and that's last time you want to find out your insurance policy is not good is after you have to file a claim.
Right.
So,
the other thing I would say, Mike, that's important is a lot of these carriers, if you've been on these legacy type policies, they're not updating them. So in other words, I guess it's kind of like your iPhone, right? I mean, if you go out and you secure back in 2015 a quote unquote iPhone 2, in 2020, they're not going to give you an iPhone 10. You're still going to have the same insuring agreements and the same, maybe exclusions or sublimits that might be on the policy. Well, again, I would ask people in the audience, do you think the technology solutions you were offering in 2015 are just as good today? No, I mean, you're offering different services like 2FA that weren't, important 5 years ago, but they are today. So be careful. That's the one thing I see. If you keep letting these policies just renew, and there's little effort put into the renewal, the carrier is probably, hiding behind maybe some exclusions if the barrier to entry isn't necessarily difficult. And you got to make sure that the policy is keeping up to date and up to speed with what's going on in the MSP community.
How often do you think what do you recommend for your clients? Like, how often should MSPs be talking to you or whoever their agent is to make sure that they're covered? Like, I would assume you do some kind of review with your clients yearly or month or.
Yep. Yeah. Usually it's done at renewal, but obviously we're here anytime. So you get some clients that really just want to go over a lot of this stuff at renewal, and then we get other clients that'll call us 2 or 3 times during the year. I mean, I think one of the biggest things that MSPs need to understand is that in 2015 insurance was enough. In 2020 insurance is not enough. You got to have certain risk management and risk transfer techniques. If you don't, and your only reliance is on this insurance policy, even if it's well written, and you get hit and 10 of your clients are taken down and you got $1 million policy, you might not make it. And what do I mean by that? Like contract use, are you using an MSA? Has your MSA been updated? Does your MSA require the client to carry cyber? Again, it's an evolving market, and MSPs need to continue to evolve in their risk management and risk transfer techniques, because if not, it could get you into trouble.
Interesting. I will circle back to that, but I want to ask you if you're seeing more cases now and claims with COVID, during that period, like, have things changed? Have they gotten worse, better, stayed the same?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's actually, it has gotten worse. And so not necessarily the ransomware attacks, against MSPs, because that seems to, continue at the pace it is. So if you want to say level off, it's not a good pace, right? But to answer your question, the disturbing trend that we've seen since March is that what we call is notice of circumstances. So an MSP is essentially coming to us and saying, hey, TechRug, something happened to our client. We aren't being sued yet, but they're indicating that it might be our problem. So kind of the answer to your question is a lot of the MSP's clients, and I totally get it, right? They don't know what tomorrow brings. So they don't want to spend additional money on certain security service offerings, right? But the problem for the MSP is that if they aren't recommending these certain security standards and something is to happen, right, the attorney on the other side is going to question them in court. Why does the accounting firm down the street have 2FA on their email and my client doesn't, and they're an accounting firm? Outside of following a standard, or you testified in front of Congress and have all these credentials after your last name, you're going to get hit hard. But again, it would be no different in any other industry. I mean, if a doctor, right, treats a cancer patient one way with chemotherapy and another way with holistic medicine, and he gets sued by the holistic medicine option, he wasn't following the AMA standard, So what we've seen is, again, a notice, I think it's up 60% from this time last year, a notice of circumstance where MSPs are saying, hey, something happened to the client. Maybe it was a lot of the clients are, applying for government funding, for example, the PPP or the CARES Act. And so they're getting these emails and going, oh, yeah, well, I did apply for that PP. This is a legit email. And it's a ransomware attack, right? Or a link that allows somebody in the network. Or they're getting tricked into sending money to someone they shouldn't have. A lot of our MSPs will tell us that before they might have had 5% of their clients' employees working from home. Now it's 95%, so they're using a home firewall built into the router. That's not a good solution. So the cyber industry or the cyber carriers are also seeing an uptick in what we call standalone cyber claims. So the lawyers, the doctors, the nonprofits, the end client for the MSPs, they're seeing an uptick in claims. And MSPs got to be careful, because if the clients aren't following your security recommendations and they don't have a cyber policy, all of a sudden their negligence is probably going to try to get pushed back and become your negligence, and you got to be careful.
Wow. So, and you're with risk management and risk transfer, I assume you're talking about the other things they do, the MSPs do, other than getting insurance, right? They have to have insurance, but they also have to be selling certain things, right? Or be doing certain things when they're selling. So what things should MSPs be selling?
Yeah, I mean, again, I would say, we tell our clients all the time, you need to make it a we approach, a team approach, as opposed to I'm going to dictate to you approach, And so there are standards out there for MSPs and guidelines to follow, the NIST cybersecurity framework, ISO, COBIT. Pick a standard, sit down with your client and say, as your outsourced CIO, because again, pick big picture, pick a Fortune 500 company, AT&T, Verizon, American Express. The MSP is the CIO of American Express. Their client is the CEO of American Express. I will tell you right now, if the CIO of American Express doesn't have the necessary security in place and is not either A, making the CEO aware, or B, letting the CEO call the shots, if there is a situation, the CEO is not going to go down. He's going to go right back at the CIO and go, why didn't you tell me, right? So I think that MSPs, when I'm talking about risk management and risk transfer techniques, they need to be sitting down to with the client and saying, hey, just like a doctor has to follow the AMA guidelines, or just like an attorney has to follow, the bar in their state, we need to follow the guidelines that are dictated to us by the government. This is NIST. Here's a list of some things you have to have in place. If you don't want to have these things in place, that's fine. But I need to get, again, we tell our clients, because they represent certain things when you come to TechRug, we make them go through a risk assessment. One of the things we ask them is, do you provide written recommendations to your clients? So it's an easy pushback for our MSPs, because they say, we make certain, when we're filling out our application or going through the renewal process, right? We represent certain things to the insurance carrier. If we aren't doing those things, Mr. or Mrs. Client, this isn't good, because if you have to go use this policy and they come back and say, oh, I thought you guys were following, these guidelines or going through, these written security recommendations, and you aren't, the MSPs have an easy pushback like, hey, the policy might not work and I don't have $1 million sitting in the bank. So what do you want to do? Do you want to implement all the security? If not, here are the 40 things I'm going to offer you. You're only picking 10. By signing this, I'm making you aware that these 30 offerings you're choosing not to take, and you're self-insurance. So don't knock on my door when the local backup gets hit with ransomware and you can't pull a backup inaccessible from the network.
I have that. I have your risk assessment here. Does it make sense to kind of go through that, show that? And
I think I'd given you one, Mike. I looked right before shame on me. It's an older one, but we've added some stuff. Just like, again, I was telling you, MSPs kind of up in their service offerings. We've added some stuff, but that kind of just gives you an idea of the risk assessment. And that one we'd used up until probably 18 months ago. We did, update it, and we've asked probably 50, 55 additional questions. And our risk engineering team is working on another 10 or 15 more that our clients will go through next renewal that they didn't, this renewal. So, we're just trying to prevent, because insurance, I always tell them it's a reactionary product. In other words, you're coming to me because something bad had happened. If we can do anything to make sure that that doesn't happen, right, as much as we can contribute, we're going to try to do it. Now, the policy, again, will work, but it's, there's sometimes some expectation that MSPs have, like, oh, well, if a client leaves me 6 months into a 36-month agreement, will the insurance company pay us for the next 30 months? No, they won't. The purpose of insurance is to bring you to where you were at before the time of the loss. If somebody decides, 2 months after the ransomware attack, that they're going to go to the MSP that's been calling them for 2 years down the road, the carrier is not going to pay that lost business interruption.
Makes sense. Yeah, this is a pretty in-depth document. So, and this is something you go through with your MSP client, or they go through with their client?
Well, I think it's a good checklist, right? To maybe sit down with your clients, because, then you're telling them, hey, here are some of the things we're representing to the carrier that we have to have in place, so it could serve as a good checklist by saying, I'm telling them we're doing these certain things. Again, if we're not doing these certain things and we got to use the policy and the policy doesn't respond, that's not good for me or you.
Right. Interesting. Yeah, I'll stop sharing here and get back to my questions.
Yeah.
So obviously the MSPs need to have their own insurance protecting themselves. What about the clients? Like, do you recommend their clients get insurance?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, another great question. It's to me, it's mandatory, because, MSPs have cyber for their negligence. Clients need cyber for their negligence. What do I mean by that? If you have a client that leaves an unencrypted laptop in the back of a Lyft or an Uber in an AMA conference, and they've got to notify $200,000 worth of people, that's a them problem, not the MSP problem, right? If the client, the MSP's client, sends $250,000 to someone they shouldn't have, that's a them problem, not an MSP problem. And if you're not careful, again, what we kind of talked a little bit about earlier is if they don't have a cyber policy and that cherry tree in their backyard to go pick off of if things go wrong, it's kind of the drowning person syndrome, right? You got two people that drown, and your natural instinct is push the other person to the bottom so you can get to the top.
Right.
So they're going to push their business to the top and push you to the bottom and say, well, why didn't you tell me? And again, with the standards that you got to live up to, if you aren't following this for each and every client, I've been on these court cases. The lawyers will drill you. Why do certain clients have A, B, and C, and my client only has A and B? What determination did you make that they don't need C? So it's much easier if a client is victim to a cyber incident if they can just go and collect from their insurance policy. So because MSPs aren't careful, when you go through some of these vendor contracts, it's not that it's right or wrong. I mean, Microsoft's going to limit their liability as much as they can. They spend a lot of money on lawyers to do that. But MSPs are potentially carrying billions of dollars of liabilities from their vendors, and if they're not cautious and clients aren't doing certain things, then $100 million is coming back at them with client liability, and now they're stuck in between billions of dollars of vendors and $100 million of clients. That's not a dance I want to go to alone.
Wow. Crazy. And now if people are watching, for those watching live, if you have a question for Justin, put in the comments, whether you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, just put a comment in and we will get that answered for you. If you're listening to this on the recording, you're always welcome to go back to this post on Facebook or YouTube, find it and leave a comment. We'll get an answer for you. Or certainly, and Justin, we'll share Justin's contact info so you can get in touch with him. Because if you haven't taken a look at your policy in a while, you might want to talk to this man. I got one more question for you here. So one of the things that I hear a lot with audit is big question I get asked is what should I do if these folks refuse service? And some of our clients will tell us different things. Some will tell us what they do, right? Like I know some of our users use audit for business reviews. So they're sitting with their clients and some new thing comes up, right? There's with what's going on in the marketplace now, there's always a new, especially in cyber, some kind of new protection or new service that these MSPs add to their stack, and they bring it to the client. They want the client to understand what it is and upgrade to it. And the client's sitting over there going, well, I don't want to buy something more. They'll make, sometimes our users will have them sign the audit.
Yeah.
What do you recommend they should be doing if they're not, the customers is refusing to do something that we know they have to do? And does that open us to liability?
Yeah, I think, it depends on the MSP, but we hear one of two courses. Some are pretty stringent, actually come up with some sort of waiver letter where, it's a kind of a release of liability letter. And it seems, to work with some clients. I think it's also good. Sometimes it can be a revenue generating activity where the client actually sees, hey, listen, I've got to sign this, release a liability letter. How much, again, was that backup that's inaccessible from the network, right? So we've heard back that it's a good revenue generating activity. But we have other clients that'll say, hey, I'm still going to work with you, right? But I'm going to provide you with a critical action letter. One's going to go on your file, one's going to go in my file, and we're going to give one to the insurance carrier. And so if anything goes wrong, I think you can use these in QBRs or yearly meetings, right? But I think, MSPs have to make a conscious decision to say, if we go to court and I hand this manila folder to the attorney, do I have a defendable position in court? If the answer is no, you better start making it so it's a defendable position in court. If you've got, an MSA signed, you've got several critical action letters in there. You've got where you've recommended standards. Mike, at some point, I don't know how much more they can do. I would say, and we do this at TechRec. I mean, if we get a 200 credit score client, we just don't work with them. They're too high hazard. If we get a 500 credit score client, we work with them, as long as they agree to help get to an 800 credit score. And if we get our 800 credit score clients, we answer their calls on Christmas Eve, right? Because they're great clients. So,
right.
I would say the same thing is that if you get a client and they're saying, hey, listen, you know what, I absolutely will not get a business grade firewall, for example. I'm just going to rely on the firewall in my router to help protect all this PHI and PII. I would walk from that client, because it really is getting to the point. I see it on the claims. It's almost not an if, but a when it's going to happen. Is it going to happen in 2 weeks, 2 months, or 2 years? And I would ask you, those 2 or 3 clients that are grossly negligent, 200 credit score clients, is it really worth losing your firm over those 2 or 3 clients? I would say no. You're better off, again, pitching cyber and making sure that your clients are carrying that cyber, because the insurance carriers, I was reading an article that was talking about how they're tired of paying cyber claims. So something that one of the carriers brought up, it's mandatory you have 2FA on email. So just by going through the exercise of mandating and recommending that your clients carry cyber insurance, you could probably grow 5 or 10%, mushroom those accounts by just having your clients comply with the cyber requirements on their cyber policy that the carriers are putting out there. So, I think, again, going back to your question, whether it's a waiver letter or critical action letter, you've got to do something, because we've got to have something in that manila folder when we go to court. Because if not, and you've got 12 of your peers that are sitting in a jury box, the lawyer's going to make it pretty clear. My client cracks backs and cleans teeth. They don't do technology. If they thought they should have it, why wasn't it there?
Wow. And you have clients all over the country. I don't know if you have clients outside of the country or not, but where are there worse states than others, or is it like the same wherever you are?
Yeah, I mean, we only operate in the U.S., and that's just purely from a licensing issue. We've had a ton of requests, and I might look again this coming up summer for Canada, but it was just the process was a little tedious and the cost was rather expensive. I think it was like one of the provinces was like basically the whole, what we pay all year for all the licenses in 50 states was just one province in Canada. So it was like, it's pretty expensive. But if companies are headquartered in the US, but we've got a lot of our, 50, 100, $150 million MSPs that have other operations outside of the country. We absolutely, the policy is worldwide, and we can take out some international GLs. So all of our clients right now, we've got actively, again, all clients in all 50 states. Some states are a little bit more stringent on the privacy laws, California, New York, than other states. But again, this is just my feeling. I think in the next 4 or 5 years, we'll have some U.S. version of GDPR in all 50 states. It happened with the privacy laws where, there are a couple of states had privacy laws on the books. Now today, everybody does. So in time, again, just my feeling, I think there'll be some U.S. version of GDPR that will be in every state. So to answer your question, I don't think it really, the way the policy responds, a ransomware attack's a ransomware attack, whether it's in Utah or Ohio, right? If you lose client data, whether you're in Texas or Florida, it's just making sure that the policy's properly written.
Gotcha. This is great. Good stuff. So let's tell people how they can get in touch with you to make sure that they're covered.
Absolutely. I mean, I think Audit IT might have some stuff, but if not, the website is techrug.com, techrug.com. And there's you can submit information there and it'll go to, one of the staff, and we'll make sure that we get back to you as fast as we can.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here, Justin. Really appreciate it. It's great seeing you. Hopefully I'll see you again soon in person on the road. Get back to normal.
Absolutely, Mike. No, it's great seeing you, man. Stay healthy. And, I appreciate you having me on this afternoon.
Thank you. Take care.